Hey everybody, today on the podcast, I'm going to be talking specifically to you. If you have had something in mind that you want to start, and a career you want to change, something you want to pivot to, and a side hustle you want to go figure out, today we're going to be talking about how to make that happen and my number one piece of advice, having been there before. Welcome to the podcast with Kylie Nichols. The goal of this podcast is to inspire you through both my story and the stories of other powerhouse women to take that first step towards living the best version of your life. So grab a notebook, grab a pen, and get ready to get started with Kylie Nichols. Hey everybody, happy Friday. I'm Kylie and you are listening to the With Kylie Nichols podcast. I have had kind of a hectic morning. I don't know about you, if your family ever goes camping, but we are prepping to go camping for a couple of days. And Soren is very into it. My husband loves camping, is very excited to make it the most it can be. I am very not outside-ish, and so I'm just really trying to go along for the ride, and I'm really fortunate. He said, just get your bags packed, and I'm going to try to do everything else, so bless his heart. I think we're going to have a great weekend, but trying to get 5 kids ready to go camping for a couple of days. It's a thing. So anyways, wish us luck. It should be a fun time. But last weekend, I actually was able to speak at an event, and I really love being invited to speak. I was actually on a panel, which is really helpful, and got some great questions. And as I was answering them and putting down some thoughts, I said, this make a great podcast, I think. So one of the questions that was posed, and I do get frequently in like DMs and other, an email was, what advice would you give to someone who wants a career like yours? And it's kind of a question I have to break down, like what's my career, and what advice would be great for somebody who wants to do that. Like I said, I get a lot of messages asking for advice on like leaving their current job and going after the thing that they have always had in mind or they want to do, or their kids are all in school and now they're moving from stay-at-home mom to wanting to go pursue something else. Like, how do you get the courage for that transition? Or how do you figure out, how to make it work? How do you know when to make the leap so that it makes sense and is a good idea? So all of those things are great questions. My career as CEO and founder of Nickel & Suede started as a mom. I started as a stay-at-home mom, as an Etsy shop owner. I had very little job experience, especially office job experience or leadership experience. So I can definitely think about I started as this and now I moved to this. So I totally get it. So for me, this really was almost like a second life. And I think that's the question, and a place where a lot of people are is like, what is my second life going to look like? And there's honestly another great podcast called Second Life. And it's really interesting to hear about all of these, especially women leaving their first career, the first thing that they went after, or this first part of their life, and starting another adventure, which is awesome. So what advice would you give for somebody like that? And really the thing that came to mind to me is, and you're thinking of where you want to go or what your dream is or what your big idea is, you really need to just keep focused and say, you don't have to know how to get to Z. You only need to figure out how to get to B. So Z is the ultimate, amazing, coolest dream. You don't have to know how to get there at the beginning. You only have to know how to get from A to B, then B to C. The whole picture can be really daunting. Somebody asked me, did you ever believe that you would, imagine that this is where you're going to be? And the answer is yes and no. At the beginning, when we were starting making jewelry and designing things and figuring things out and shipping our first orders, that was really fun. And it felt like, wow, we could make this bigger. I always knew that I wanted, even from the beginning, I wanted every woman wearing Nickel & Suede earrings. They should. They're so comfortable. They're so lightweight. They're so stylish. They look so good. They really pull every outfit together. So of course I want that for every woman out there. But how to make that a reality, I definitely did not know what Z was going to look like. And that still evolves for me, honestly. As success happens, then you're able to dream a little bigger, and your sights get set higher and you make new goals. And so Z will almost always be moving as you make new goals and things. But I did have this idea of like, I want every woman in these. Every woman should. There's no reason someone shouldn't try these. So, I always admired brands that had started where I was starting in the basement, freshly picked Susan Peterson. She was sewing moccasins at her kitchen table. And then, you saw her later on Shark Tank and having done 11 million in sales and more by now. And so I knew it was possible. But you don't have to know how to get to Z. You just have to figure out how to get to B. And B is always more manageable. We almost all know what B is. And sometimes we don't know how to get there. And maybe we're scared of it, but we almost all know what we need to do next or what we need to figure out next. So once you figure out how to get to B, then maybe C will, come from a friend, or maybe D will show up on your doorstep, or maybe E will be from somebody you met. Like, you never know where the other ones are going to come from, but that's fine because you'll figure those out as you go. So how do you figure out how to get to B? When we were in the basement, I had cut out the first pair of earrings. Okay, what's the next step? Well, we need to figure out how to get more of this leather or more leather to sell. We only had gold and we only had a snow leopard color. Like, those are great, but how do we find more? And so we had to Google it. And honestly, that's where I would say, whenever you want to figure something out, first thing to do, Google it. There's obviously so much on the internet, but I think we forget, or we're maybe unsure of how to sift through all the information, but it will spark something. So what have I used Google for recently? Interviewing. What questions do you ask in a second round interview? Like I said, I didn't ever work in an office, and I'd never interviewed anybody until I started running my own company, but there's a way to do it. And so why not start with some informed facts, and then you can tweak it for yourself. And so this week I looked up what's typical in a second round interview. Now, I've interviewed plenty of times before, but I was like, I wanted to start with something from the experts, right? How to plan a meeting, like what's typical in this type of a meeting. And there's a million agendas out there, and they don't all suit you, but it gives you an idea, and it helps you kind of get some reference on something you've never experienced before. Maybe your second life is going to be taking the skills you learned in your first life and being like, I'm going to go start my own business. So then you're good. But a lot of us, I think, we want to switch. We want to pivot into something else. And so there's a lot of things to figure out. So how do you figure it out? First, Google it. Look it up on the internet, like I said. Second, start using the people around you and ask anybody you know for a start. And that can be kind of vulnerable to do. I just messaged a friend this week and I was like, we want to create something like this for the holidays. You're really good at figuring stuff out. Where would you start? And she didn't necessarily have an answer for me, but she had a suggestion, which then could lead me to the next person or to the next person. And so I think it's just, you have to be willing to make the ask, which is nervous. You have to be, people may say no. People may say, I have no idea. Or somebody may say, oh, I know someone who's done that before. Perfect. That's all you need. And if you hadn't asked, you wouldn't have the information. I've been wanting to add piercings to our stores. It's been on my mind. I talk about it to people. I'm excited about it. And by talking about it, I was able to find someone who, was in a later conversation, and that later conversation said, hey, I think Kylie's looking for that. And it connected me with someone who maybe can help us make the next steps. So, asking anyone you can think of, talking to people about what you're dreaming about, what you're interested in figuring out, will lead you to the next things. So it's not rocket science, but it does take some courage to be willing to just put yourself out there and say, I don't know, so can you help me? My third thought is that you need to be continually cultivating yourself. So reading books. I read a lot of books. I don't always finish them, but I start a lot of them. And a lot of them are about business or about marketing or about leadership or things that I'm like wanting to learn more about. And there's so many perspectives out there in the world that it's really good to just keep feeding yourself. So I think feeding yourself with books of ideas, podcasts, filling yourself up with that can help you then put together your own thoughts about the situation or what to do next. So it just is almost like I know this is cheesy, but like obviously food for your brain, but like there's new stuff coming in, which means new stuff can come out. You can figure out the next things. Also taking time to think, taking time to journal, just write down your lists, write down what you know so far, write down where maybe you would want to go next, like kind of plot out what you think maybe B, C, D would look like. But spending time thinking about it intentionally will then give your brain something to kind of think about in the background. And then maybe when you're in the shower or when you're on a walk or on a run, you'll have an idea pop into your head. But I think if you're not taking care of yourself and you're not feeding yourself new ideas, your brain isn't going to be trying to figure something out. It's not going to be engaged and excited. So I've found a lot of success with those simple things. And I really don't actually have to read very much of a book in order for something to say, ooh, this applies to me here. Or I can figure, now I have a frame of reference for this. So, and then my last thing would be you just have to try. You just have to get going. So if you're trying to figure out what B looks like or how to make it happen, you just have to try something. So come up with an idea and try it out and see if it works. And if it doesn't work, great. Now you know one thing that doesn't work and you can move on to the next thing. But you won't learn quickly if you just kind of stay frozen. I think it can feel paralyzing to say like, I don't know if this is going to work. I don't know if this is going to get me where I need to go. But just like making the call or just like texting somebody or sending an email, like that's trying, and then you'll get something back from that. So, I think really just keeping in that mindset that you can fix anything, anything you break or anything you mess up by trying something, it's fixable, but it's better to try and learn and to do that as fast as possible. I think here at work, I'm always, I think progress is better than perfection. And that's hard to put into action because we don't ever want to like fail or put something out there that's not good. But sometimes we just have to try it. And maybe customers won't respond to it if it's a product that I'm trying, or maybe, I'll get on stage and answer questions and totally fall flat and everybody will be like, why did they invite her? I don't know. But I'm trying to figure out how to be a public speaker. Okay, then I need to go out there and just try it. I've said this with the podcast before. Same thing. If I want to have a podcast, if I want to grow my skill set there, then I just have to try it. I just have to put it out there. So when you're willing to jump in, when you're willing to try something, then you're going to get feedback. And that feedback maybe nobody listened, or maybe a lot of people showed up and bought it. And those kind of feedbacks can help you to learn and to grow. A lot of us want to look like we have things figured out, but that keeps us stuck because then we aren't able to try the next thing because we want to make sure we're, being very careful with what we try and what people see us do. But the people that I've seen be the most successful are the ones that just put it all out there. They just go into it and they learn quickly from the things that work and they don't work. So just to reiterate, if you are looking to make a change or to try something big or to go after something, maybe it's joining an MLM. Maybe you really want to be successful selling this product that you love, or maybe it's becoming a fitness instructor, and you really want to teach classes, but you've only ever been to like 2 classes because classes themselves make you anxious. Like that's a real thing, but you can be that person up there in front of the class. You just have to figure out your next step, and pretty soon you'll be up there. I know for myself, speaking at that event last weekend, that's probably the first time I haven't been nervous walking up on a stage to answer questions. And afterwards I thought, oh my gosh, like I'm really proud of me, because in the past that I would have been sick to my stomach all morning about that. I wasn't even quite sure what questions they were going to ask, but I've been through enough of these things that I trusted myself and I felt confident that I could handle it. Like if the question came, I would have an answer. And that has only come because I've started this podcast, taken some other speaking engagements. I've done a really crappy job at some other speaking engagements. I've answered questions or totally frozen in an interview when I've been asking somebody things. But all of those things led up to experience that then taught me I can be confident in this situation. I know what I'm going to do. And I know if I say something, it'll go great, or I'll make it through and I'll learn something for next time. So I think the there's a phrase that I love, and it's either we win or we learn. And so I think that really applies with continuing to try the next thing, and eventually you're going to get to your Z, and it's going to be so great. You're going to look back and say, wow, look at all the steps that took me and got me here. Okay, so you try something. What if it doesn't go well? How do you get the courage to try again? How do you say, okay, I've still got this shot. I can still figure this out. I've talked about speaking at this event recently and speaking on the podcast and all these things kind of giving me confidence or giving me courage. But a while ago, I think I've talked about it on the podcast before, but I did a speaking engagement that I felt like I totally bombed. I was like so sick and anxious going up to it that I felt like, and I was really depleted. I was really drained. I had almost nothing to give. And so I felt like that totally came out on stage. And there was so much pressure that I had on myself to do well. And then when I didn't do well, it was even like, oh my gosh, like I'm so mortified. Like I do still have the footage of that on my phone, and I've never watched it again because I'm just like, I'm sure it was terrible. I'm sure it was just the worst. Like I can't handle feeling those feelings again. And so I didn't speak. I mean, honestly, thankfully COVID happened. And so I didn't quite have to get on the horse again in front of people. But then when like the next speaking thing came around where somebody asked me to do it, I mean, I'm sure they didn't hear that one event that was terrible, but I was like, okay, have I worked on my, what's going to work for me in this situation? Last time went so badly. And so I actually changed the format. And so instead of being the one speaking for 20 minutes or like having to be the one entertaining the whole time, I was like, I would prefer actually to be, can you ask me questions instead, and then I'll answer. And that gives me it's easier to be on stage listening, having someone ask you questions than you having to just fill the whole time yourself. And in the past, I would have been like, no, it's better if I stand up there and I do it all myself. Like that's what an amazing speaker does. But I've also learned like, no, at least for this time, like I would rather have the less pressure and do it in this way. So I guess what I'm saying is I had a really bad experience. And then when I had the opportunity to do it again, I said, what would work for me? What can I do that's like still saying yes or figuring it out, but making it easier on myself? I think the other thing too is as soon as I had that really bad experience, right after that pretty much is when I hired a life coach. And I'm not saying everybody needs to hire a life coach, but I did feel like I've got to do something to overcome this. I don't want to be on stage again, get off stage, feel so bad, and have these bad thoughts running through my head like rampant. They were just like, I mean, there was no other thought in there but a bad negative, like you're the worst, that was terrible. I'm sure everybody and I thought, I don't want this to be the case. I know these thoughts don't belong, but I don't know how to get rid of them. And so I hired a mindset coach. I think you can also go to therapy. I think you can also journal about it. I think you can talk about it. But I at least had I don't ever want to do this again. And so one of my steps was I've got to get rid of this negative self-talk. And I did work on that over the last year. And I do think that has helped with that. One other thing that I felt like I bombed was interviewing for an important position that I needed to hire for. And it was taking months. Like I could not get this position hired for, but I had also never I had never been the interviewer to try and attract somebody good. And I was feeling so self-conscious because I knew I didn't know what I was doing. I knew they could tell. And yet here I was, the only person who could do it. And so I had to figure it out. And so I had one interview that the candidate asked me questions and I was like, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer to that. And I also had no word track to say, I'll get back to you on that. Or, yes, those are really important. We can cover that in our next interview or something. I didn't have a word track to get out of it. I just basically froze and I was like, I don't know. And I was so mortified. But the thing is, I had to get up and shake that off and I'd be like, I still have to hire for this role. I still have to get this done. So what did I do wrong? What would I do differently next time? I'm going to ask somebody for a word track. So next time that happens, I'm prepared to say, that's a great question. Blah, 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 blah. So anyways, I both times I felt like I totally failed and I was surprised by failing. And so it really sucked, but I still had to do the next thing. And so it was like, okay, how do I get over this? What's the thought I need to get rid of? And a lot of times it's mental. A lot of times it's, I change this thought. I have to change this mindset. I can do this again. So to sum it up, if if you want to have a career like mine, you have to be willing to step out of your comfort zone, figure stuff out, try new things. And there are so many tools in order to do that. So that number one thing I would want you to remember is you don't have to know how to get to Z. You just have to figure out how to get to B. And C will come, D will come, E will come. It's not easy. You will definitely have some chances where you fail at one of those steps and you have to get back up again. But the cool thing is that through failing and getting back up again and having a hard time and trying again and having maybe you accidentally go on the road a certain different way and then you're like, wait, this isn't the destination I want. And you have to go back. All of those things, I don't know how to say it, but you're experiencing it with yourself. So like you and yourself, like you learn how to trust yourself. You learn that you can get back up again. You get confidence by saying, okay, I'm resilient. I tried again. I figured it out. And figuring things out is so confidence building. And so no matter how long it takes you to get to your destination or what you do, as long as you continue moving forward and trying the next thing, you'll be building something inside yourself. Confidence, resilience, grit, all those things, which will help you continue on your journey. So you can have your second act, you can have your third act, you can have an addition to your current act. You just have to be willing to get scrappy, figure it out, and try again. So hope this episode resonated with you. Be sure to leave a review. You can follow on Instagram and on YouTube if you want to watch this in person. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening today to With Kylie Nichols. I hope that today you felt empowered to take one more step towards living the best version of you. Tune in next week for another episode, and in the meantime, you can find us elsewhere on the internet. You can find me on Instagram at Kylie Nichols and at Nickel and Suede. You can also find us at nickelandswade.com. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.